long, all Charlie Smith, Gong Hei Fat Choi. I'm the editor of the Georgia Straight newspaper in Vancouver, and I'm very happy to be back for another week on WOW TV. One of the big issues that has leapt to the forefront in Vancouver and across the province in the past month has been the environment. Part of it has been related to the Northern Gateway Pipeline and the approval by a joint review panel, a federal panel looking at it, tentative approval, 209 conditions attached to that, and the federal government is looking at it. But other issues have also emerged. One of them is the Great Bear Rainforest. This is a massive area of the north and central coasts of British Columbia, an area of 6.4 million hectares, larger than Switzerland, 6.4 million hectares, and there are new agreements between industry and environmental groups to set aside more land to protect it from logging. So what you're looking at was this process began in the 1990s when environmentalists and industry were having these wild fights and arguments about the extent of logging. But at the same time, you had First Nations who had their concerns, and the provincial government, which was looking for revenue and also managing the logging situation. So the province was the regulator. What happened was the First Nations wanted more decision-making, the environmentalists wanted more land set aside, and the companies wanted to stop the harassment of them when they would try to export their timber into other markets and not have the environmentalists running around causing troubles for them when they're trying to sell their goods. So in 2006, there was a landmark agreement to set up a whole new approach, and the land use forum was created so that different parties could discuss. There were 3 environmental groups involved: Greenpeace, Forest Ethics, and the Sierra Club, several forest companies, and they would bring forward recommendations, and a $120 million economic fund was created for the First Nations. And then by 2009, they decided to set aside about 50% of this area, the Great Bear Rainforest, from logging. And so what the First Nations were able to do was sell carbon credits. And these are when you don't log an old growth forest, a bunch of carbon is preserved, and there are international carbon markets, and also the BC government buys carbon credits to maintain carbon neutral government. So they were able to sell the carbon credits, and there was a process put in place where they could continue discussions and come forward with more recommendations in 5 years. The environmental groups were not happy with the 50%. They thought it was a good start, but they felt that 70% of the old growth had to be preserved to achieve biodiversity goals and to preserve the species. There's 17 marine species along the coast, including different species of whales. There are grizzly bears, there's the rare spirit bear, there's wolves, there are rare bird species, there's marble murrelets. So it's really quite an ecological paradise, the largest intact coastal rainforest in the world, and it's often called Canada's Amazon. So you had these discussions continue. Well, what's come out at the end of January is that the companies and the environmental groups have agreed to set aside more land, coming close to that 70% total. But it's up to the First Nations and the provincial government whether they're going to approve this. And part of the process is a 60-day public input component, and that's required under the Land Act. So it's quite complicated, but a lot of progress has been made in recent years in terms of preserving old growth forest in this part of the province. The Sierra Club of BC's Jens Whiting was telling me that they're actually preserving old growth forests, unlike on Vancouver Island, where a lot of the protected areas are what's known as rock and ice. So if you look at Strathcona Provincial Park on Vancouver Island, there aren't a lot of important forests there protecting biodiversity. But this is the case in the Great Bear Rainforest. So it's quite a major environmental accomplishment, I think, for the 3 groups involved. And it has certainly toned down the war in the woods that we used to have. But another aspect of this is the Northern Gateway Pipeline. Because the First Nations are selling their carbon credits, they're not logging, they're foregoing logging, and they're doing other economic activities such as ecotourism or dealing with the marine environment. They're very concerned about an oil spill. So in the midst of this, you've got the Northern Gateway Pipeline barreling right through the Great Bear Rainforest, and in the eyes of many First Nations people and the environmentalists, posing a threat to this elaborate agreement that has been created to provide economic alternatives to the First Nations apart from forestry. Another environmental story that popped up recently was the mayor of Burnaby, Derek Corrigan. He was speaking out against the Port Metro Vancouver and a proposal to increase coal exports from Fraser Surrey docks. So he went on a rant in the council chamber and alleged, among other things, that the Port Metro Vancouver had hired SNC Lavalin, which is a Montreal-based engineering company, to do an environmental assessment. And Port Metro Vancouver put out a statement correcting Mayor Corrigan and pointing out that it didn't hire SNC Lavalin. It was Surrey Fraser Docks, which is the proponent that hired the SNC Lavalin. And why this is important is SNC Lavalin has been at the center of controversy over the past year, in part for its role in working with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, but also because the World Bank has refused to provide funding to SNC Lavalin, and that relates to projects it was involved in Bangladesh. So Mayor Corrigan was questioning why SNC Lavalin is in the midst of reviewing environmental issues in connection with a coal port facility when it has been in such hot water recently with the World Bank, and why didn't another organization go? And then Mayor Corrigan also took some shots at Port Metro Vancouver for its governance, saying that the board is basically comprised mostly of representatives of companies that profit from Port Metro Vancouver decisions. So Port Metro Vancouver came barreling back and stated, wait a second, Mayor Corrigan, it's the staff that make the decisions, not the board of directors, so that's not fair. So I don't think we've heard the end of that. The third environmental story that came up I found quite interesting was a conference on clean technology, which was at the Vancouver Convention Centre on January 30th. And the opening speaker was Mayor Gregor Robertson, who's a strong advocate of environmental protection and taking action against climate change. Well, the mayor was pointing out that the media focus enormous attention on fossil fuel industries, coal, mining, forestry. But he said there are 80,000 technology jobs in the province, which exceed the number of jobs in forestry, mining, and oil and gas. So he's calling on the media to pay more attention to the clean technology sector and the technology sector in general, saying that there's misplaced priorities, that there's so much focus on things like mining and oil and gas, but not nearly enough on the types of businesses that are providing solutions to environmental problems.